Welcome, everyone, to a dry January episode.
Hello.
I am not sure if this is going to be the first or second. It's going to be somewhere in there. For dry January, we can do anything we want. We're going to break format in a lot of different ways. And this is our chance to talk about different things.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I make a lot of masculinity jokes. And I talk about being a man a lot in this show. It's happened many times.
We've noticed, Trevin. Don't you worry. But before we jump in any deeper, we probably should say, just a disclaimer, this is not a regular episode. I know we said it was a dry January episode. This is going to be us on a more raw, personal, and serious tone of episodes. So if you love us just for kicks and gigs and you don't want to deal with serious topics, that's okay. Those episodes will be coming back next month.
Yes.
But for right now, I think we just wanted to start the year off. Like you said, putting good out into the world is very important to you right now. And also, we are kind of wanting to build and incubate our stories and our episodes to make Trevin's life easier. So
yes,
if you're not in the mood for it, we get it. But I appreciate that this has been on your heart and something that you want to talk about.
Don't think that all dry January stuff is like dry of comedy. This is probably the only serious episode that we're going to be doing this whole time. We are breaking format for the whole month, but this one is the only serious one. I like to do in my dilemmas a lot like mental health updates, and I think a lot of people really appreciate that, and I'm sure some people don't. So if that's not for you, this is the one episode in dry January that you might not like.
Right. We are going to have a lot of other fun podcast guests on for January and play games and still give you guys like good trivia and dreadful dilemmas and all the things. But yeah, this is the one outlier. So here we are, real and raw, laying our hearts out on the line.
Absolutely. So I experienced a bit of a microcosm event during this year of making Live, Laugh, Larceny. And it was a dilemma that we talked about briefly, but then we just kind of got past it. When we recorded that episode was episode 160, The Horrors of Hosting.
Okay.
In that episode, I had a dreadful dilemma that had to do with Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Chiefs, and his commencement speech to the Benedictine College. If you guys don't remember that episode, I'll play a little clip of it here. Amanda, why don't you give them a previously on Live, Laugh, Larceny?
Oh, beautiful. Previously on Live, Laugh, Larceny.
So Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Chiefs, and I don't like to do this kind of thing. I don't want to talk about dishing the tea and this kind of opinionated stuff, but I feel that this is pretty important. Harrison Butker gave a commencement speech at the Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas, not too far from here.
Yeah.
It's a Catholic school. Emily and I sat and watched the whole 20-minute thing last night. He has a bunch of different things that he talks about, and you can tell that the way he talks and a lot of it is just like, we have a bad leader, and that's why these things are happening in the world, and you can tell he's just like hating on the president. It's not saucy for me. I don't care. These are all things we've all heard before, but in his commencement speech, he found it important to say, and to all the women in the audience or who's graduating today, he says, you all are very excited for getting your degrees, but what is really important and special is that you're going to now go forth and become a wife. So inside of this speech, he also addresses masculinity and how men should be unapologetically masculine and something about emasculating men these days and stuff like that. I have a family member that just shared one of his quotes as a very inspirational thing.
From the same speech?
From that same speech. It was about being unapologetically masculine and just like not having to apologize. But I don't really know how quite to articulate it. But there are things in that way of speaking that is made to kind of keep people held back. That kind of stuff and those kind of narratives that people are told. Like, I just can't imagine, even if you are a woman in the crowd and you do believe in that and you do think that, oh, a woman's best place in the world is by a man or something like that, to be fed that over and over and over again, I feel like that's very limiting. If I wanted to have this argument with this family member face to face, they'd say, oh, well, not you. Why? You know, like you're perpetuating the thing that I got away from. If you're going to be confronted with it, but it wouldn't be you.
Yeah.
I don't think people get the messages that go through with that. And that's really frustrating.
Yeah. No, thanks for opening up, Trevin, and sharing that.
So that was just a clip of the episode. I didn't put the whole thing in there because what I'm going to read for you guys today is a little thing that I wrote around the time when that episode came out. When that episode came out, we talked about this. I remembered making a couple little jokes about my past, and there was one point where I kind of caught myself, and I got really emotional for just a quick second while making the jokes about this thing.
Yeah.
And I felt so stupid in the moment because I was like, this was supposed to be a silly joke. But I was kind of tiptoeing around some serious territory for me.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write something, and it was so weird because I was really overwhelmed with different feelings because for any person who's ever made any big differences in their life or like big changes, we kind of always know what our problem is. Mm-hmm. But it's just like you don't really hear it the same way until you finally hear it in the way that it really cuts deep to you.
Yes.
I made this joke all the time saying like, oh, I'm not a man and making these kind of jokes. So I shared this dilemma here about Butker's views on masculinity and the emasculation of men. And it really affected me when I was recording that episode. Something happened, kind of like my little brain break. I just was able to kind of catch lightning in a bottle of awareness. And it just, for once, the joke I had heard over and over and over again kind of actually meant something to me. During that weekend, as most people know, we run a very like tight recording schedule because we write one story a week.
Yes.
And we just keep this going for a whole year. I was like, I have to follow this feeling, this emotion. So I sat and I wrote this really long article out because, you know, not just how it affected me, but I think there's a lot of things that me being in a generation of parents now, even though I'm not a parent, a lot of people that I grew up with now are parents. I can still see a lot of the same mistakes that were made with me, that happened to me as a kid, still being made by people my age and people that I am close to. But, you know, it's kind of hard to tell people that. You know, you don't want to like...
for sure.
Like, hey, I think you're hurting your kid a little bit when you do that. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to hear that as a parent. I'm absolutely sure it is.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's even worse as a parent to hear it from your kid.
Oh, God. And they will tell you with brutal honesty.
Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to touch on that a lot in this too. And I really just want to see like a better change in the world in a lot of different ways. And I think that what I went through, if explained well enough, can hopefully help us all see the error in our ways and maybe kind of change for the better by maybe hearing a different perspective.
Yeah, I am all about writing out your thoughts. When I was young, I had journals. When I got older, I used to write poetry a lot to let it out. I actually just recently told Jordan, I was like, I think I want to write poetry a little bit more again, just to get some emotion out.
No, you only write petty criminal stories. I better not hear that you use that writing for anything else.
He's like, no, damn it. But it's always been therapeutic for me to write out my emotions. So I applaud you when you were feeling that to get it out.
I feel like I'm called towards this in some way. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really sure in what way or what I'm supposed to be doing for the world. I did that episode and I've always just been like, man, I wish I could kind of help show how damaging like this fake idea of masculinity is and like how much it's damaging people and how much it damaged me. It's something that I always wanted to do. When I wrote this article originally after we did that episode, I had to scramble real hard. Whatever episode came out after that, I'm curious what story it was. I'm sure it was still great, but I had to write this whole long thing and get another story done to keep everything going.
Yep.
I really wanted to release the article then because I thought maybe it would do something, but I got too scared. I got too scared of, well, it would put me out there and also like open me up to being like, oh, hey, funny guy has feelings, dumb. Mm-hmm. But then it also was going to make my parents see a lot of harsh truths and errors that they had. And as we said, you don't want to hear that you made a mistake somewhere, even if it is...
Even if it's true.
Even if it's true, and even if it's not meant in a mean way.
Yeah. No, totally. It's a very sensitive topic.
It's a very sensitive topic, and I think we all deep down could have a conversation about one or two things with our parents that we haven't.
Oh, for sure.
I'm in this weird spot now where I host a show where my whole belief in art and creativity and all of this is just like you should be as honest as you can with your audience always. Mm-hmm. But then I started seeing that my mom became the audience. Mm-hmm. But my mom doesn't get the same version of me as I give her when I'm around her because of the safe version of who I am and how I have to be, or how I feel I have to be because of the way I was raised and with these different masculine things I'm going to talk about. that was one thing that really kept me from putting it out back in May. And I was just going to put it as a blog post. I was like, it's not going to get that much attention. Maybe a lot of people will read it and it'll make a lot of people feel good. That would be great. But I was still scared of what that could do. And if like one person read it, because a lot of people are going to get defensive to it. Like my parents could hear it the wrong way and just say, why are you saying I was such a bad parent? Which is not at all what I'm trying to say. And as a mom yourself, I'm sure you would understand why a lot of your defenses would want to come up and feel that way.
Totally. I know you were briefly mentioning that show that we worked on in the past. I kind of had not a same experience, but a similar experience to you, where I really wanted to talk very openly and honestly about my sexuality on an episode. And I had never told my parents that I was bisexual. And I knew that they were listening to that to support me. And sure, is it hard to open up and be vulnerable if you have a bunch of listeners? Yes. But it's even harder when you have that one that's like someone that you know and love, that you know is going to hear it. And I ended up having to tell them, even though I was married at the time to a man, and it was so long after the fact. And even though they kind of knew, because after I told them, they're like, what about this girl in high school? Were you? And I was like, yeah, guilty, you know.
Oops.
But I was so scared. But I knew that if I was going to be on the mic and putting something out into the world, I had to unapologetically be myself. And I had to have those talks with them before it came out, because I knew that they'd be like, what?
Yeah.
So I get it. I even get where you're coming from, just as a podcaster trying to be like a son and like a normal person in the world.
Yes.
It's hard.
It is really hard. But I think because it's hard, and like they always say, you should do the things that scare you and all that. I know that it's not just hard for me, but it's hard for a lot of people. And the kinds of false realities it creates for other people, and like what it takes away from us. We all want the same things a lot of times, no matter what the semantics of it all are. Sometimes it's just a conversation away from both people getting what they want, but everybody just doesn't want to go through the pain of it.
That is so damn true.
So I didn't do it in May, and I just kind of let it not become much of a thing. And then the election happened, and I've talked about it in our show. I was really angry at the time of the election, which, sorry guys, I swear everything I'm going to talk about is not political, but I was affected in a lot of ways because it did feel like a lot of this kind of violent sort of rhetoric towards people that aren't a certain norm is feeling very normalized again. Like when you hear those things in the news and you're like, oh God, news was crazy in the 90s, when they would say the most whack stuff about people.
Yeah.
You'd be like, that was so racist and wrong and whatnot. But I mean, if you look in the right spots, you're still seeing it today. I mean, one thing that really still sticks in my mind and bothered me so fucking much was very close to the time of the election when that dickhead Jesse Waters from Fox News,
oh God,
he had that whole thing that said, it's scientifically proven that if you vote for a woman, you'll transition into a woman.
Wow.
Yeah. Like he actually said that.
What scientist is he seeing?
I don't even know. But when I saw that, it made me so sick and angry, because that should not be on the news, because everybody knows that's not true. That's just people flailing to come up with anything they can to change somebody's mind, with a very stupid kind of thing to be afraid of.
Yeah, guys, it's not that bad to be a woman. I mean, yes, there are very hard parts, but like, it shouldn't be a punishment. Like, if you do this, you're gonna turn into a woman. Maybe you're happy about being a man, but it's really like you're going to be fine. And also, that's not how genders work.
No, if you think a ballot has that kind of magical powers, I can't imagine what else you believe.
Exactly.
That would have seemed like something that I could have showed you and said, look at this newspaper from the 90s. And you'd be like, oh yeah, that's crazy. Nobody get away with that now. And it's like, no, people still get away with that, and they're pushing it like crazy. So I was very angry after the election, and there's a lot of good things that I want to see happen that don't happen from either side, that aren't happening with us. We're not communicating with each other. Kind of like I talked about with the community, saying we're all just being shut in more to where we think that everybody sees the same Facebook feed that we see.
Yeah.
And we don't. So we get mad at people who don't see the same world that we see, but our news is made specifically for us. So literally no one's going to see the same stuff as you.
It's an algorithm, guys. It's literally how it's set up. Even just me getting on my husband's accounts, I see different things than I see on mine.
It almost looks like a different website sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't want to get very much into this, but have you ever gone to somebody else's house and just saw them open up their Netflix and you see like what is suggested for them and stuff like that? And you're like, do you even have the same shows as me?
Right.
We do all have the same shows. It's just, it's so catered to me that all the different levels of genre and all the different things that I like, it's all tailored to me. So I would never run across Bad Mom's Christmas, most likely, but you probably see it all the damn time.
I see it all the time, and I'm still mad that I haven't been shown Hamster v. Human yet.
Right, which I'm surprised you don't. Away from the political talk, my point is I got so angry about it, and a lot of me wanted to just be like, anarchy, maybe we should all just duke it out, and that's not really going to help anything. And you can kind of just see how the cycles of things begin. I feel like maybe this kind of brutal honesty, and even though it's going to be really weird because I haven't even talked to my family about me putting this out yet, I don't intend to blindside them with the episode, but now the clock is on me to have the conversation.
That's exactly how I felt. Seriously, Trevin. I was like, oh.
But the funny thing is, like, it would help me not have to be 30% Trevin at dinner stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And it would make my parents feel like, wow, he's not a different person on his podcast than from how he is here.
Exactly.
So it's like we all want kind of the same thing. It's just we're all kind of getting stuck in our own different, not wanting to get our feelings hurt kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm putting this out here into the world, hoping that in some way, maybe I can help change some minds or inspire people in some kind of way, because I'm just a white dude who doesn't know like real problems. I mean, I have a lot of privilege in this world, and I don't have half of what I'm sure the adversity you've had or what people in real minorities feel. But I know how much my life has changed because of how I was treated. And I would love to see less of that in the world. And instead of seeing the cycle continuing and me feeling like hate has kind of won in a lot of ways and that I should be like hating hate, I don't think that's really the way it's going to work here. Because I think a lot of these angry people just don't know any better how to explain what they want. Just like a lot of people that I feel really close to don't know how to explain how angry they are right now without getting more mad and like wanting some sort of a civil war.
Yeah.
So I want to give what I was feeling in May. I have not done any rewrites to it. I get really nitty gritty on discussing that episode with you. I use that as kind of the jumping off narrative point. It's a whole thing, the whole article of it. But I'm going to explain the original dilemma very deeply. So I didn't want to give you guys the whole clip, and I didn't want to explain it all right now. Because I believe this is a very big jumping off point, I don't believe that the words of Harrison Butker had affected me that much that I should be doing all this. But I do believe it was like when you throw a bunch of things on a shelf. I think that's like the Mormon saying when people start to like deconvert out. It's like, oh, you just put your disbeliefs on the shelf. And then people say, well, eventually your shelf breaks.
Yes.
I think my shelf of masculinity kind of, I mean, not that it didn't break a long time ago, but my emotional barrier of it kind of felt something in all of that. All of these different things mixed together and made me feel it. And instead of trying to harden back up to it, this is me trying to make a change, and hopefully I can help other people change too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and read this.
Okay.
Because I know a lot of people hate podcasts where people interrupt the writing and stuff. I'm just going to read this thing straight out like we do our stories. I won't put stupid sound effects.
Really? No boing sound effects today, Trevin?
There are a couple parts in it where I was like, a sound effect could go here, though. You'll probably be able to find those in there. I might put a soft music in there as long as that's not too cheesy.
You can take the boy out of the petty crime realm, but you can't take the pettiness out of the boy.
No, you can't. Even if it's like my own truth, I'm just like, let's make it stupid, though. So I'm going to go ahead and read this, and then we can discuss more, and hopefully this is good for everybody, I guess. And here we go. Throughout my years of writing silly stories and cracking butt jokes for the podcast, I've been going through a long journey of self-discovery. With each story I tell, I challenge myself to revisit even the most basic of concepts, allowing me to better understand who I am. Not fitting in, the relentless pursuit of success, and the stark realities of economic inequality are themes I've touched on in the recent stories, making sensationalized small crimes the vehicle in which I express my deepest truths. Yet despite my commitment to be fun, light, and what I call cynically wholesome, I let the amplified words of a small man get the best of me. Each one of our episodes begins with our dreadful dilemmas, a first segment designed to let us get some banter out of our system, while observing an inconvenience/subject in our lives as much more dramatic issues. I was between a couple different topics for this episode, but decided to talk about the big local news of Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker giving the commencement speech to Benedictine Catholic College in Atchison, Kansas. A long 20-minute tirade involving anti-Biden, anti-COVID, and anti-LGBTQIA+ rhetoric, as well as strong sentiments towards the binary belief of how men and women should live. Don't worry, I'm not going to get political. The seemingly innocuous dilemma, however, brought me back to my own experiences, blindsiding me with some emotions I wasn't prepared for. Growing up as a child in rural Missouri, I was confronted very early with the strong belief of what a man is. A man is a provider who works hard, demands respect, is strong, both mentally and physically, and is always right. When the man of the house speaks in certain situations, because I said so is generally the strongest evidence needed on why their way is the best. But of all the things that a man is, there's one thing that a man never was: a girl. For me, I spent most of my childhood as a little girl. Now, before you think of me as more interesting than I am, this is not about my internal gender identity or a secret transition that none of you knew about. I had an external gender identity issue because of how I chose to spend my time. Gaining emotional issues from an unstable mother and riding the turbulence of my dad's divorce from when I was 2, I wasn't the most confident or outspoken kid. Depressed since as far back as I can remember, I didn't feel like challenging myself physically, especially since I had a terrible relationship with my body. With the challenges already present in my upbringing came a social contract that I never signed: the agreement to maintain my title as a man. Throughout my most formidable years, this title would be given and taken away at a moment's notice, generally depending on my willingness to perform physical labor. My dad would wake up after a late night of work, prepared to now maintain his farm, only to see me playing a Ninja Turtles video game on a hot summer afternoon. I would preemptively cringe, knowing how I would be greeted. Are you going to stay inside like a girl, or go outside and do something? Each time there was work to be done, which, let's face it, there was always work to be done. The act of pursuing my leisure activities was viewed as denying the manliness I was given at birth. I didn't want to go out and work on project cars or fix fences for the cows. There was no sense of pride felt by me when I maintained a farmland that I didn't choose to have. Still, each time I showed any bit of resistance, there I was, a girl who would rather be inside. This led to my family eventually sticking me with, quote, the girl chores, because I would rather stay inside all day. Vacuuming, dishwasher, laundry, etc. All of these were mine to do, almost feeling like a punishment or probationary task for not being a man. Although I rebelled quite often towards the masculine activities I should have been doing, I accepted the fact that I was the boy who did girl chores. It was the lesser of two evils, still granting me the comforts of having a roof over my head. Every reminder of my femininity got buried deep into my brain, creating the narrative for what kind of life a boy like me could have. Each time a different jab would come my way, it added to the pile of hurt and confusion already there, still trying to find a stable existence of this ever-growing mountain of masculinity. During this time was when I was fed one of the most damaging lies that stuck with me for my entire life, a lie that I mistakenly thought I'd be able to share during my dilemma without issues. I chose to handle the subject of the commencement speech without preparation, since our dilemma segments are more off the cuff. My wife and I had watched the entire 20-minute speech the night before, so I felt comfortable in my understanding of the words used and the context behind it all. Our show has always been very empowering towards women, while lightheartedly making a villain out of toxic masculinity. So although it was a hot-button issue, the discussion wasn't too out of place. Amanda and I started bantering about the speech as a whole, something she was just learning about. I filled her in on the biggest opinion he shared, which was his idea of women's personal or career accomplishments, including the graduation he was congratulating them for, coming second to, quote, the most important title of all, being a homemaker. We went back and forth about limiting beliefs, the generalizing of women, and how, even in that very room, there were probably women who didn't match the perfect circumstances he was trying to play up as the ideal life for a woman. Trying to keep the segment brief, I wanted to touch on the stance of the masculine way men should be. Quote, be unapologetic in your masculinity. Fight against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things. Never settle for what is easy. End quote. Honestly, nothing I haven't heard before. I'm sure I've probably written a similar quote for a toxic male character in one of my stories. As an adult, I'm not sensitive to it, especially a quote as basic as this one. However, the fact that it was a Chiefs player, a local issue, and a quote that my brother found moving enough to show a strong stance towards, it struck a major nerve. Recently, I had a conversation with someone about education and how well I did in school. For me, I struggled a lot with assignments and testing, leading to me receiving mostly average grades. When I was first asked how I was in school, I wanted to give a passing response by calling myself a dumb or average kid. But then I processed it and really thought about why I wanted to retreat to that answer. In the span of that conversation, I realized how much the continuous narrative of me being an average kid held me back. It took me decades after high school to see the intelligence I carry as a person, leaving me wonder what I could have achieved in a better system. The recent realization began to intersect with the conversation I was having with Amanda, leading me to make the same connection. How much quicker could I have found my place in the world if I didn't spend my first 18 years feeling like I failed at becoming a man? What if maintaining the house wasn't framed as girl chores that I was relegated to because of my gender handicap? What if I was empowered for being different instead of judged for not doing the same as everyone else? The self-doubt and frustration I've carried for most of my life stem from that same narrative, a shame that even I perpetuated long after leaving the farm. Every time I mentally or physically couldn't succeed in something I tried, I'd be quick to remind myself of the rules I learned long ago. That I was different, and due to my choices, not deserving of what others had. I considered all the transitional years I had, spinning my wheels in the name of progress, only to find myself upset and still in the same mental place. The body image issues, the weight fluctuations, the injuries from over-exercising to fix myself, the midlife crisis at 30, thinking I had nothing left to give. All of this was the time wasted that I blame myself for. It's only very recently that I have even reached a point where I am happier with myself. I thought about where I would be now if I lived in a world that I belonged to. Reflecting on my brother's unwavering support for the quote, I couldn't help but notice how deeply it resonated with me. Not only did he stand firmly behind its message, but he also shared it in an inspirational manner, even going so far as to boast about his jersey sales, which had soared as a result. It became evident to me that this message held significant importance to him, to the extent that he felt compelled to brag about his endorsement. Curious about its potential response to my personal offense at the quote, I turned to Amanda and posed a hypothetical scenario. What if I directly expressed to my brother that I found the quote personally offensive, that I identified with the notion of, quote, cultural emasculation of men? As I considered his potential response, I could almost hear his self-preserving rebuttal. Well, I didn't mean you. But still, after years of being reminded that I was not the ideal expectation of a boy, that it was necessary for my task to be deemed girl chores, I saw myself in that quote. And in my brother's support, I saw a future of more kids feeling like they needed to wait decades to find themselves. Or worse, maybe never find that peace at all. But where my biggest mistake lay was in my next decision. Attempting to maintain a lighthearted tone for my comedy show, I decided to recount a quote from my childhood, a quote that my friends and I used to share for a good self-deprecating laugh at my trauma. It seemed so absurd that no rational adult would take it seriously, making it perfect fodder for a funny observational bit. Yet, as a child already struggling with feelings of worthiness, the quote had a lasting impact. During one of the times I resisted participating in typical boyish country activities, I was told that if I didn't spend more time outside, my, quote, hair would grow long, I'd grow boobs, and my thingy would disappear. I would literally turn into a girl. You can see how this would play out well in a conversation between friends with similar worldviews. My friends and I would always mock the ridiculousness of it, coming up with hypotheticals, like a man doing his laundry only to find his penis had disappeared from performing a feminine act. I'd recounted this story countless times, always evoking laughter with its absurdity. But realizing that demeaning message was part of why my confidence was always so low shattered my comedic timing. I figured I could open up a little bit about myself, share that sad truth, have a fun laugh at toxic masculinity with Amanda, bada bing, bada boom. However, my emotional hiccup removed the humor from the start. As a person who has just recently learned how to be okay with not being good at something, I still do worry about how collected I am. Of course, I think it's okay for everyone to show emotion, but not me. Not on a comedy show. That's not funny. Not to mention the fact that it looks like I'm about to cry over the words of one rich douchebag in a meme made from an illegitimate sports website. But still, there I was, fighting for air just to go into a bit that required a specific kind of energy. Observational humor loses its impact when it's delivered with tears. I already replay the moment in my head like a Chernobyl-esque disaster documentary. The cause of the accident always seems so obvious in hindsight, like an entire safety team taking a day off or sending an atom bomb on a train with no brakes. That's exactly how I felt like my brain was working. I'm about to cry, having this major breakthrough about why I always felt so different, while my mouth is still trying to trudge forward with a recollection that's going to play more like a tragic confession than a witty reflection. It went exactly like I expected it would. Amanda looked at me more in a sympathetic tone. It was not funny, and I had lost my cool so badly that I couldn't even articulate why it affected me so much. I typically elaborate on my thoughts to leave no question about my intentions, but for the first time in forever, I was speechless. Not only that, but I once again felt powerless against those beliefs. Amanda eventually swooped in, transitioning us into her dilemma and allowing me to bounce back. I was running long on my time anyway, so the show needed to go on. You know how it is. You don't want any one-star reviewers to complain that we talk too much about ourselves. The episode went on, and I was pretty rattled for the rest of it, but I feel that I recovered well enough. I kept reflecting, connecting dots to questions I'd always had about myself. Any listener of the show knows about my ongoing joke about not being a man. As an adult, I've made peace with the joke, knowing that I'm making fun of a very specific ideal. The issue is, I've been making that joke for decades, even though I don't think I truly understood it back then. Now, after years of processing my emotions, I describe my childhood gender as a boy desperately pulling on a locked men's room door. In the narrow worldview of my farming family in a small town Missouri, I was often teased for not conforming to the expectations of typical farm boys. I wasn't playing with dolls, coloring my nails, preferring the color purple, wearing skirts, or doing any of the other things you see these memes point out in, quote, non-masculine boys. I just didn't want to spend my time toiling over farmland I didn't care about, or proving my worth through what project car I'm working on that year. I was still obsessed with plenty of boy things, like comic book characters, action movies, and video games. I just didn't want to be miserable doing something that didn't make me happy. Yet my disinterest in certain activities still led to parental figures asking me if I needed to replace my wardrobe with dresses due to my choices. Originally, I wanted to write this article because I'm going to release the episode either way, and I wanted to explain why this subject made me emotional, while other serious topics we cover don't. It was a chance to give myself a mulligan in expressing the full picture of my beliefs, while pointing out why one segment maybe didn't land like it should have. However, editing the episode really cemented my decision. I figured that maybe it wasn't as noticeable as I thought. Like I would drop the files into my episode template and hear that my strong reaction was just in my head. It wasn't. I knew it wasn't. Amanda didn't save me from a conversation that I was doing a good job of communicating my way through. When I pressed play on the segment, I heard an all too familiar sound. The vocal fry. The hesitation. The attempt at sharing my feelings through heightened emotions and a half chest of air. This was the voice I spoke through for most of my childhood and young adult life. Hearing that part of me again after finding the confidence in myself made this bit of writing feel necessary for others rather than just a chance to save my cool. I'm incredibly thankful for my father. There isn't 1 ounce of me that wishes my custody went in a different direction. He kept me safe, fed, and supported me through things I wanted to do. Although a lot of these quotes and lessons were learned from the way I was treated, I know he didn't sit down and come up with a game plan to make his first child abnormal. He was raised in the same world. There was no challenging beliefs when I was growing up. It wasn't just my dad. It was all the men around me shaping my upbringing. Whether it was an uncle or a family friend, any man had the right to remind me that I was acting like a girl for any number of interests or activities. My dad never saw a problem with others doing it, likely because that's how he was raised and it felt normal. These were the rules of the world I spent the first couple decades of my life in. For the first time in my life, at the age of 34, I can finally say that I'm thriving. I've managed to stay creative, I've broken through a lot of my own mental cycles, I'm in a healthy relationship, and I'm happy. Like a real kind of happy, not just blissfully unaware of a depression spell just waiting to pop back up. Ironically, I'm probably the most masculine I've ever been. I'm more outspoken than I've ever been. I'm brave, and I just recently allowed myself to start weightlifting after years of avoiding it for being unworthy. I found that part of myself in spite of the things I learned growing up. It wasn't until I fostered an accepting circle that I felt confident to even attempt man activities again. The continuous public bragging from my brother made me realize that the, quote, cultural emasculation of men that he would like to stop is kids like who I was. If I popped a quarter in the Zoltar Speaks machine and wished myself back to the age of 8, my brother would call me a little girl just for not being like him. If I had grown up in this era, I would have seen my family sharing those messages and believe they wanted me to be different or not exist at all. And if confronted, of course, they would say, it wasn't meant like that. But even if you're trying to speak against a very specific type of emasculated boy, not saying any of that is right, you don't get to choose how the children in your life hear it. And you don't get to choose which part of that speech people see you supporting when you wear his jersey. And don't tell me you already had it because he's a kicker. I wonder how much less of a late bloomer I would have been had I perceived myself as normal. I remember times in high school when I would get a girlfriend, and I would be teased because it seemed silly that Trevin liked girls. Even my little brother joined in on the teasing. I looked at him, 6 years younger than me, and always wondered, how did you get past the point where you can openly like girls, but it's weird for me? It took a long time for me to be where I am today, and it took a lot of work. Being an overachiever, I am a bit salty about where I could have been without the article. But I'm just happy to be living with some peace now. I am a straight white male, and I had to fight back tears while talking about the speech made by an NFL kicker. It wasn't the specific words by the specific person, but the fact that those words were just an echo of the ones I had heard as a child. The same words that caused me to tell myself again and again that certain experiences weren't meant for someone like me. My story is nothing compared to the experiences of the LGBTQIA+ kids or all the women in the world. After all, I was the one being called a girl the whole time. How do you think all the girls in the world feel when boys are striving their hardest not to be called girls as a punishment? I was pretty shocked when most of the kindest and safest people in my life ended up being women. They also have every right to be pissed at this speech. Even if you do think your most important role is a homemaker, don't you think you'd like to celebrate the accomplishment at hand before being reminded that you haven't reached your goal yet? I wrote this post because I feel like people are quick to explain away the damage they cause when it's against those whom they can't relate to. My story is nowhere near the amount of adversity that others have, but if my experience can help just one kid feel worthy of this world, it will have been worth the awkward conversation this is going to cause me. Sincerely, a former little girl.
Oh my God, Trevin. And now I'm crying.
I thought you might.
I'm an emotional soul. What can I say? I remember when you wrote that, and I read the beginning, but I think the kids interrupted me or something.
It was a really long read to ask.
First of all, even though I'm an emotional person, I didn't even expect myself to cry. So thank you for being so vulnerable.
Hey,
on
you're
here.
welcome.
I really appreciate it. I think that being vulnerable is one of the strongest things anyone can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that they're usually made to be opposite of that. Because sharing your truth and putting your full self out there, even though you know that there are people out there that don't want to hear it and will not agree with it, is a very brave and strong thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, if this video were to blow us up, it would be very easy for a hateful majority to sink all of the 5-star reviews we have to make us less.
For sure, for sure. So it feels like a risk, and it's just a very brave thing, and I just applaud you for putting that out there. And I don't know, I think hearing you echo what I had said beforehand about how saying a girl was a punishment, just hearing you say that before, I didn't even know that was at the end, was really cool to hear, because that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't have it the worst here.
No. It was just a really cool tie-in moment, but it's really tough because I know you've said these things to me about your childhood and growing up and the things, and it isn't the first time you've said some of these things, but hearing that it was a consistent thing that not only was going on just with people in your home, but just all around you, really breaks my heart in a very big, genuine way. And it doesn't mean, like you said, that your parents are horrible people, because they're great.
Yeah.
I love them. You love them. It's just an unfortunate, larger societal thing that seems to just keep going down through generations. But it is heartbreaking to me, because I know I had a completely opposite experience of gender roles in my home growing up. And I was always encouraged to wear what I wanted, do what activities I enjoyed. So just hearing that is a little heartbreaking. And I'm just really sorry that happened.
You know, it happens, I guess. But it's also confusing too, because I can look back at so many very loving moments. It's not like my parents and I were combative all the time. You have a lot of good moments. You still really love and look up to these people. Yeah. But there's just that thing in the back where it's just like, oh, they don't like this part of me though.
Right.
And you have to always kind of remember that, you know?
Right. And to them, it may have been a throwaway comment and like a joke or a throwaway and not a big deal to them. But when they're happening on a regular basis and when you're growing, you're really trying to form your core identity and where you bring value to this world. It's a bad combination.
Yeah, I think one thing that separates me from a lot of people, and I'm not saying that I'm better than other people, I think I'm just way more in tune with my emotions than most.
Yeah.
I can feel that feeling. Like, I understand when children of parents want to resent the parent for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The funny thing is, it's like you grow that awareness over time, and then by the time you finally realize it, you're like, oh, I've already been kind of distancing a little bit on that one subject or just in general. And I understand why a lot of people who maybe aren't as super in tune with their emotions want to resent their family or like resent their parents because of the one thing they did. Yeah. And I totally understand on the other end why a parent would be like, well, what the fuck? Why don't you want to hang out with me anymore? Like, I raised you, I did this, I did that.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things that you didn't realize what you did then. And the kid at the time didn't even have the words to explain what they were feeling.
Totally.
If you were to stay, like I became a little bit more worldly, you know, I came out and did therapy and stuff. People like my brother are not going to therapy and stuff like that. So if you're not equipped with the ability to explain those feelings, you're going to just have those emotions and have to figure them out somehow or cope with them in some way.
Yeah.
You have to be able to see the intentions behind it. My dad was still doing everything he could for me. He was still showing me love and doing all this stuff. But his intentions behind calling me a little girl and calling my chores the girl chores was to motivate me. And if you're teaching your kid these masculine ideals, you're in the thick of it too.
Yeah.
My dad was just coming off a divorce, which...
That's a whole other story.
Which is hard. He's always had the belief as a man that you are the provider and you should be making the money. He was working 2 jobs. He was working on a farm that was his dad's farm. He's working on, that's a lot of work extra to do. And the masculine like mindset is like, if you're not succeeding, you're not working hard enough. So you need to work more and you need to work harder. And I don't know how many times in my life I've hit the breaking point of that. And then I have to fall down for a while. And then I'm like, okay, I'll work hard again. And then I end up working too hard again. And then it happens again.
Yeah.
So I see how it works. I don't know if everybody can see it in the same way, but like I can see how that like cycle works. So like my dad was just like in the thick of trying to do all of this, you know, providing and this and that and keeping up with all these other things. And then he looks at me who seems ungrateful for just sitting and playing video games. And it's just like, quit being a little girl and get out there. Because we both met at a really shitty job. My dad was just getting me ready for the quote unquote real world.
Right. I was just thinking that like he may have thought that he was protecting you in some way, even though it did the opposite. He was probably like, well, you're going to hear way worse out there, you know, but still.
And he wouldn't be wrong. Like, again,
yeah,
he really did toughen me up and prepare me for that.
Right.
So like, again, his intentions weren't to make me feel like I was abnormal forever. His intentions were to try to get me to be motivated. And like I was a sad kid, just naturally always so sad. So like that's another reason why I wanted to be indoors all the time. It was just like, what's the point?
Yeah.
He didn't know what he was doing. And Emily and I were recently having a conversation about like art and stuff. And like she's working on an art thing right now that when she showed it to her mom, it kind of hurt her mom's feelings.
Oh, shit.
I told her like this is just a quote that I've always believed so much in is we don't get to choose whose feelings we hurt. We don't. We can choose the intentions behind it. And if that gets misunderstood, then it's up to you to communicate your way to fix that.
Yeah.
But if you choose not to, then there's your problem.
Yes.
Emily's art was a metaphor thing that is similar to what I'm going through right here and like showing like, hey, I want to say that you kind of made a mistake here, but...
You made me feel a little different. Yeah.
Yes. I know I also don't get to choose that if I hurt their feelings by putting this out. But I also know that my intention behind this pain is to fix things for everybody.
Yes.
If I were to find out that me doing this and hurting their feelings made a mistake, I should have never did that, and 10 years later I would apologize or something, sure.
Yeah.
But I'm doing the adult thing and understanding that like the circumstances of my parents and what they were taught made that possible. And I know that was not their intention.
Right.
But this was a real problem for me. And I think a lot of us, like I know, a lot of parents out there in my generation are probably making these very similar mistakes. Maybe not in the masculine side. It could be about politics or race. This time right now, I mean, a lot of people are really condemning a lot of people just for some really weird things like eating cats and stuff. And I think about that too. Like I grew up in the 90s and you know how long it took our generation to stop making jokes about Chinese food being cats and dogs?
I know.
The clock just restarted on that for, what was it, Haitians?
Yes.
So you come back to me in 12 years when you hear a bunch of kids going to school and coming back and talking about Haitian people eating cats and dogs.
Right.
Because that's just how that shit starts.
Yeah.
And we just continue it. And I said during the episode about finding your community and all that stuff that I want to try to find a way to aggressively put good in the world and try to change some of this shit because it's not going to happen by just bitching on a podcast forever, like fighting harder on the other direction. I think that my dad deep down would like to not have to keep up with what he was taught. And that's what I was taught. Emily and I, when we first started dating, we had this fight which we don't really have very many. We were in the old house. And it was just a communication issue. We just were not communicating well. And after everything I learned about being a man, I also kind of learned things about women too. Like, oh, well, women just want to kind of spend your money. That's what I learned. And that's just because I saw that in every aunt and uncle and all the families that I was around.
Yeah.
But we had an argument about money once. Yeah. And when you're not present in your mind and when you're not being thoughtful about your actions, I feel like we go on autopilot. And when you go on autopilot, you revert to whatever your parents did.
Exactly.
I don't remember if it was about money or what it was. But anyway, I ended up just rolling over and letting her win the argument. And I was such a martyr about it. And my thing I said to myself, and I actually said it out loud, which was the stupidest thing. I judge myself every day for it. I said, well, I guess this is just what it means to be a man. And she was like, what the hell are you talking about? And even I was just like, why am I feeling this way? Like, why was that what came into my brain in this moment?
Because you have heard it your whole life.
Yeah.
It's hard to break the toxic patterns that you see. There are so many that I've seen totally different than yours that I still catch myself. Things that all the matriarchs in my family do that I do now. And I'm like, oh God, what am I doing? You know, it's hard to admit it, see it, understand it. It's hard when that's all you've heard and seen your whole life.
Yeah. And I think it makes it easier for some of these older generation people to say like, oh, these people went woke or, oh, they're this. When really the kind of thing that maybe drove that away was something that maybe a conversation about where this all stems from. It makes it so much easier for us all to hate ourselves. But I know you as a parent, because I mean, it would break you. If Lila, imagine just 10 years. I mean, the more the time builds up, the more you think everything's okay. And I mean, and it hurts when somebody points something out that you did wrong and you've been doing it wrong for a long time.
Yes.
Or like if you had a booger in your nose and you did it for like a whole speech or something.
Yeah.
It's like, why didn't you tell me in the beginning of it?
I know.
When it's a parent thing and it's like, I've been feeling this way for 29 years, you know?
I know. It makes it way more complicated.
Yeah. I don't know what side you're on because I'm not a parent, but I want to say that like in giving both sides of this, my sympathy lies so much with the parent too, because I have to feel like a bad guy who is just like twisting a knife into both my parents by saying this and by putting it out there. But I hope that parents listening can also kind of see what they're doing in these things too, because these build up so much. And I have seen so many families where like a kid just doesn't come around that much and they kind of come up with these ideas or reasons why they think this kid went to go become a city kid or something. And it's like the city didn't grab them and corrupt them. It wasn't that. They found a place where they felt safe to be themselves.
Yes.
And the things that you share with your parents, that's what you have as common ground. And I have common ground on certain things with my parents, but there's like these other parts about me that we don't overlap and we just don't bring that in. I think that's another reason why some parents want you to have kids, because if I had a kid, that would be something we immediately had in common.
Yes.
And it was just like, oh yeah, how do I be a parent? Okay, I'll start asking you these questions.
Yeah.
They need to be needed again for something. But couldn't you have just been there the whole time with all of it?
Yeah. As a parent of 2 young kids, they already tell me when I mess up now, but I'm already emotionally preparing myself now because I know there's going to be something that I am not sensitive enough about, or that I have a knee-jerk horrible reaction to something and it really deeply affects them and changes them and hurts them. I already know that's going to happen because I'm not perfect. No parent is perfect. Absolutely zero.
Right.
So I'm already preparing myself that when they're older, even though I'm really present in their lives and things, I guarantee you they're going to be like, it really negatively affected me when you did X, Y, and Z. And I don't even know what those are yet, but I guarantee you it'll happen because I want to have an open dialogue back and forth with my girls. I want to apologize when I hurt them, just like I want them to apologize when they do something wrong. So yes, is it hard? And in a way, I do think parents almost feel like you have to have blind loyalty to me because I took care of you. But honestly, that isn't true.
Yeah.
And as much as I hope that my daughters want to come around and be a part of my life, when they become an adult, that is their choice.
Yeah.
Even though I must admit, I think they're going to love me forever.
I think they are too. They're already kind of stuck to you.
No, but
they'll never leave you, actually.
Yeah, that might be my problem. But no, I just think it's really awesome that you're even putting that out into the world. And I think that it could generate many other helpful conversations.
I really hope so. I'm tired of feeling upset about it. And honestly, like I said, since the election, I feel like I'm in a minority of kindness.
Yeah.
And I know that's not true. Like we talked about this. I can see where the fork in the road is. Mm-hmm. The fork in the road is for me to say, majority of people in this world hate women, hate this, hate that, or anything, all the different things the news says. And the fork is telling me, why don't you just kind of come back into your pocket a little bit, hang in here, focus on just a small amount of people. You know, it's all cyclical. Your time will come again.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to just scale back and then come back out later. I have to just send this out here because I want to hear things come back to me and say, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Because I can't just look at those numbers and say that if I walk in the grocery store and cut the numbers in half, majority of these people want me dead. I can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. We cannot be like that.
No, trust and believe. There have been days, though. And I know we have lots of listeners from other countries. This is just the U.S. election we're talking about. But right afterwards, I remember I was like in the grocery store thinking actively while I was going through the produce section. I was like, oh, that man over there, he probably hates me. Oh, that man, literally. And that's not true. There could be a lot of people out there, too, that maybe they voted differently than me, but they could still maybe not be in their discovery zone yet. You know, like there's so many different levels of things. And
I mean, look at the thing I just talked about earlier in the episode about if you vote for a woman, you'll transition. Let's just say, hypothetically, there was one person that thought, well, I was wanting to go one way, but I don't want to be a girl. And they actually did it. That does not mean that anything that they did had to do with race. We are all driven and manipulated by very different things. As I said, with the algorithm with Facebook and Netflix, they all look different. So the things that are drawing your votes all look different. But I don't know that a lot of people understand that some of the things they support are also supporting other things as well that are not good.
Yeah.
And I understand that you think, oh, well, the opposite's so much worse, the opposition. I think we as people need to start finding a way to point out what we like and what we don't like and try to find a way to get it instead of just, well, these are the options available. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know that does probably start with smaller elections going up and everything. But one thing that really helps is if we can just not try to beat our kids with words to make them people that they're not.
Yeah.
Because if I would have continued living where I was living, I would have never been where I am now. I would not have a show that was going good. I would still be continuously getting in writer's blocks because I just couldn't write because I thought everything sucked because I sucked. We just need to be able to support our kids and not put them in a box for anything. I can't do handyman shit at all. It's like panic attack mode if I have to do anything with the car because it's between me and that car. And if I screw that up and I have to ask a man to come bail me out by working on it because they know I can't, 10 times worse, it's going to feel even worse. And if I screw it up, you mess up a car, you know how expensive that is?
Oh, yeah.
You gave me the bidet for Christmas.
And you put it together.
I put it together. I had to take a day off work, not to put it together. I had to take a day off work.
You're like, sorry, I gotta put this bidet in.
I took a day off work to get some show maintenance and life maintenance done is what I was calling it. But we talked about my body image issues. We'll talk about it again someday, I'm sure. But a lot of this stuff kind of stems from like me just not liking myself, not liking my body, not liking that I'm not the manly man and all this stuff. And I had to take a day off work just to clean out my closet because I have such an unhealthy relationship with clothes as well. Because every time I take a shirt off of a hanger, it feels like I'm throwing a dream away. It's like, oh, you know what? I bought this shirt because I thought it would look good on somebody, not me. And I never got to the size where it did. And so when I have to take it off and be like, it's taking up room in the closet, it has to go away, it just feels like, well, I failed that one. So every time I take one off, it feels like I'm failing.
Oh, damn.
That's just a side tangent. But the thing is, I had to take a day off so I could mentally put that bidet on because I opened it up one day after work and I was like, I'm so excited. Maybe it was the day even you were here, I think. And you left and I was like, oh, I'm gonna see if I can do it. And I said, those are certainly directions. And I just put it away. And I'm like, it's going to take days before I'm going to be able to touch a wrench and not feel like an imposter for doing it.
No, you did it. And you did it with flying colors.
Well, it did leak the first time, but
I haven't used it yet. I just saw it in there, so I don't know.
Oh, no, it works
but
great.
It looks great. Well, honestly, I'm just proud of you for wanting to do this. I know this has been something that you've wanted to do. You've told me, I don't even know how long ago, you're like, I'm going to do this masculinity thing. And I think that we gave people a warning. If they don't want to hear us being so sappy and reflective, then fine, you devil. But for those that have listened and appreciate us, putting our hearts out there, thanks, guys. That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of people have a lot of different things that's keeping them down. Masculinity is just one of them. Gender identity. Everybody has one thing, and this is my one thing. But I hope that in some way you can hear this. And if masculinity is not your issue, but it's something else, I hope you can kind of see that and just, I don't know.
Yeah.
But also masculinity thing. We got to make things work better. Like a lot of times when feminist people want to talk about the masculinity thing, men's first thing is, oh, well, men's suicide rates are extremely high. What do you think? We're all sad too. What about us? And it's like, I know.
Yeah.
Like we need to stop perpetuating this on our own kind too.
Yeah.
Because we live in a very stressful society. I don't know if you guys know that. Like the new phones coming out have AI assistants to help us keep track of all the dumb shit that we're looking at every day.
Yeah.
Should we need an assistant so we can take in more content? I don't think so. But my point is, nobody wants to hear the uncomfortable truth. I understand that kids' suicide rates are really high and men's are. And I don't want that either. So I think we have to understand that it's not women taking things away from us. It's us saying that we should have everything. And anytime something changes, we're just not working hard enough or not manly enough or don't have enough money.
Yeah.
We're never meant to win the race of what this has become, what masculinity has become.
We should never be putting anybody in an unattainable goal that doesn't bring them joy.
No,
really.
Yeah, just find happiness. I think we could all be happier if we all could just stop that. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of very pro-masculine people because I'm going to come off as like an opposition voice that says that's not right. And the people who hear that and think I need to work harder to attain this means they're going to have to like stomp me out worse.
We'll have your back, Trevin. Don't you even worry.
I just know that I'm a pretty strong person and it took so much work for me to get here. And I know there are a lot of people that aren't nearly as tough as I am. And I really wish that we would all stop doing this to those people too.
Yes.
So please take something out of this, and I hope it just makes the world a better place.
Same. And like we said earlier, this is going to be our one emotional, heartfelt Dry January episode. We do have some really fun, awesome shows that are going to come on and do some episodes and games and facts and dreadful dilemmas and all the fun things that you guys know and love.
It'll be a lot more giggly after this, I promise.
But it's really nice to connect and be honest and raw with our listeners. And like I said, we appreciate each and every one of you. I hope everyone had a great holiday season, amazing new year, and let's just bring some more kindness to the world. Why don't we?
Yeah, and give us a 5-star review if you have.
If you haven't given us a review, now's the time, because I can tell those little trolls want to be coming out the bridge, guys. So yes, definitely leave our show a review if you haven't.
Yeah, and we will see you next week with another Dry January.
Bye.
See ya. Thank you for listening to this special Dry January episode. If you'd like more bonus content and ad-free episodes, join our Patreon. Get in on the conversation in our official Doomed Crew Facebook group, or follow us on any of our socials, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or Threads. Have a petty crime of your own that you want told on the show? Email us at livelaughlarceny@gmail.com. And give our show 5 stars wherever you rate podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or Good Pods. It really helps.